Well, you were at KubeCon last week? Is that when it was? I've lost track of time.
Same. Yes, last week.
Yes. Well. We have a special software-defined interviews episode here where I'm going to talk to you about KubeCon. I'm not really interviewing anyone, but I figured since you were there, and I just imagine when you go to KubeCon, you're just flitting around from here and there. You might even have like a very overworked assistant who's like, "Oh, Miss Lee, you need to be somewhere in 13 minutes. We've got it," and you jump into some sort of big black suburban car and drive somewhere for very important meetings.
When does one cross the line into the have an assistant level?
Oh man, if only I knew. I think I'm on the wrong track.
It doesn't sound too bad. I don't know.
Yeah. I think just as an aside, your assistant would be one of the luckiest people in the world. You'd be so sweet and kind, and yet direct and very, very clear about what they should do.
I tell them no too often, maybe.
That's right.
Oh, I'm not doing that. Make an excuse for me, please.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. I'd be like, that sounds delightful. You know what to tell them. Anyway.
Oh, I would love someone who would say no for me. Yes.
Yeah.
If anyone's listening and likes to say no, please reach out. I'll tell you no.
Yeah, you remember those little keychains you would get at like Spencer's Gifts that would have a bunch of phrases that you could play? You'd push a button and they would say things.
Oh,
you could have one that just says no.
I'll pretend it says a lot of things, but I know it just says no, so I'll let the keychain decide.
Oh yeah, you'll be like, oh, this has 15 buttons. I don't know which one. It keeps saying no. I'm sorry, I gotta go.
Perfect.
Anyhow, so it was in Salt Lake. I don't think I've ever been there. So let's start with that a little bit. How's Salt Lake? What's the situation there?
Oh, it's real weird.
Uh-huh.
It's the weird thing is not what I thought it might be, which was religion based, but instead it's like city zoning based, which is like something's up. I actually Googled at one point, why is Salt Lake City so empty? It feels like we were making a joke that we're all on the Truman Show, but the staff has the day off, or the week off. So we like you're walking around a ghost town of downtown and you just don't see any normal Salt Lake City residents. And then you're like, oh, there's some people. And then you quickly figure out they're KubeCon people. It was very weird. But it was quiet and the mountains were beautiful. And there was some like cool sightseeing things to do around if you had extra time.
That is nice. So it's sort of like the opposite that you would have in like Austin or Amsterdam, where there's like the townies are crawling all over the place. Depending on where you are.
In fact, it must have been an extra strange experience for those coming from Europe to the conference, because not only are you in an American city that's just like way more spread out in general, but also just wildly empty. Very weird.
Yeah. All right. It sounds like one of my favorite old commercials. There's a guy wandering around an empty city, and he's yelling out, where is everyone? And then he finally runs into someone in an alley and turns him around, and this guy's eating a sandwich, and he asks him, where is everyone? And he's like, Arby's, roast beef sale. And so, maybe it was a roast beef sale.
That's also another thing. There were a lot of Arby's in Salt Lake City.
Wow.
I didn't know Arby's was still a thing, but we're 2 blocks later, and here's another Arby's.
Everyone loves pressed beef. It's good stuff. So you get past the roast beef sales and the conference center.
I never did. That's the end. That's the end of the podcast.
You ended up eating roast beef. It's such a great deal. So you're wiping the Arby's sauce off your chin as you walk into the conference center. What's that like? Is it a typical giant American conference center, or is it cozy? What's going on with that?
Typical giant American conference center with terrible lighting, fluorescent blue lights that come from the ceiling. There's no natural light anywhere. It's I think so. The European KubeCon was something like 14,000. I think it was up there, and the American KubeCons have been lower, at least since I've been involved. And so I think they had to be ready to accommodate that size. But what they actually got was about 9,500 is what I heard.
Really? That's interesting. Why do you think that is, that the Europe ones would be bigger? Because I would think there would be more, I don't know the figure, more interest per capita in North America. I'll include Canada, but in that area. But what do you think?
Your guess is as good as mine. I heard, I wasn't around the scene before the pandemic, but people told me pre-pandemic the US based one was the bigger one, and post-pandemic Europe is. And the word on the street is that in general, conferences are better attended in Europe than in America. Conferences that bounce back fully post-pandemic in Europe, but they haven't in America.
I guess I could see that. Yeah, I mean, I don't like to speak about the country and the European Union that so graciously allows me to live here. But I think the Europeans are a lot more blasé about that whole COVID thing. I think to some extent they're like, I'm not sure what you're talking about. I don't remember that. It's just sort of like it's not really in their heads anymore. Nor was it that much ever.
Yeah.
So maybe so. Also, it's much smaller.
And public transit is easier. Like you can get to your conference by train instead of by
that's true.
Flying. Yeah.
So let's start like big picture. Like what? Now, I think I actually couldn't discern what the official. I think with the KubeCon and other open source conferences, there's never like one official thing like there is at a commercial conference, right? Like, so never mind what the official things are. For you, like, what was the big theme or the big like thing, the new? Here's what we think about our community. Ta-da! That's going on that you encountered.
The big thing for me was that platform engineering has exploded in popularity. There's, for example, there's a platform engineering working group, and what do I want to say? So that working group organizes platform engineering coffee every morning at 7 a.m. at a place nearby. And they did this in Paris 6 months ago. And in Paris 6 months ago, 10 people came, 20 people maybe at its peak. We could like squish a couple tables together and everyone could talk to everyone. And at this place, we like took over a whole coffee shop. Like there were at least 50 people on the first day. The coffee shop, we tried to warn them we were coming, but I don't even think the organizers knew how big it was going to be. So it was very, very popular. And then in general, like platform engineering is being talked about on the main stage. In fact, there was one that was on the main stage. Of course, they talked about AI, but it was less like last time where AI is changing everything. It was more like practically, how are we going to change our infrastructure and use Kubernetes differently, and what new tools exist to help us manage large AI workloads. Right. And then they were even relating that back to platform engineering, how like platform engineering is the key to be able to manage this new type of workload with Kubernetes.
Yeah. I was looking through the I forget the term for it, but like the side tracks or whatever, the things, and there's a few interesting ones in the platform engineering thing. As always, our friends at Centasso killing it.
Yeah,
they were like they kind of I think about a couple years ago they like called it lucky for them, and they were like, here we are, this is our thing, and so they've shown up there a lot.
They're awesome, they're amazing, and Cradix is their open source project. But the AWS has just released a new open source project that is a competitor to Cradix.
Oh, what do they call it?
Imitation is the finest form of flattery. It's called CRO, KRO, which stands for Kubernetes Resource Orchestrator.
Right. Okay, well, that's practical, but it does sound like, one of... I don't know, Odin's ravens or something, but that's fine.
And it's annoying that AWS has to always make their own thing instead of just contributing to something that already exists. And
that's always been Microsoft's thing, but I think in the starting kind of with, obviously GitHub was independent, but with a little open source things here and there, and I think cemented by Kubernetes, Microsoft doesn't have to invent their own thing for everything now, which is nice. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I always think, as an aside, I don't know. Tell me if this is if my what do you call it, headcanon is correct, but like. In my head, Kubernetes was originally started to like take Amazon AWS out, and now I think AWS makes the most money from it, which is just sort of like, wow, Amazon, they're crazy.
AWS was the latest, like took the longest to like create products around Kubernetes, but yeah, they do seem, if reInvent's any indication, they do seem to be killing it.
So let's dig on this. Crow and Craddox a little bit. Like you're great at going into these categories and like understanding and explaining them. And like whether or not you've done that with this category yet, like what would you?
I have not.
like so as you think, like what would you call that category of stuff? Like what those two are doing, at least as far as you can tell at the moment.
I think Crossplane lives under the same umbrella. And what it does is it, so basically Kubernetes has that synchronization loop, and now people are figuring out they can use that loop to manage resources that are completely outside of Kubernetes. So we don't have to do containers anymore. We can do any sort of resources. But we need to have a way to pull it into Kubernetes and have it behind a Kubernetes API that can be managed with that synchronization loop, where we can define a desired state of an external resource and then have it come to fruition.
And then like you're saying, you like participate in that loop, like that the kind of constant config, whatever, setting it up.
And then so that's the foundation of it. But then it gets one layer more complex, where you can define not just like, hey, I want to have a small development environment running externally to my Kubernetes, but I want to also have it installed with Knative, and I want to have it connected to a database. Like a whole environment can be defined behind one API.
Yeah. Okay, now that makes sense. And then so what Craddox and the Amazon
Crossplane and Crow,
like tell me if I'm going down the right path. But like my impression is, I think I know Craddox the best / worst, not worst, but like I know very little, but like I read their documentation once. That's what I'm trying to say. And it seems like they're coming up with like what old farts like me would call like a schema for describing things. Like
promise.
Yes. Like being from the like generation 1 DevOps thing, where there was all this promise theory stuff. Like I encounter the word promise and I'm like, for fuck's sake,
it's overloaded.
Like, it's like it gets a little too academic, but I get it. It's fine. It's a cool metaphor. But yes, like I think it's appropriate. Like you're establishing these declarative promises of like, if you do this thing, we promise this other thing will happen. Kind of, sort of. Yeah. So there's that. And then at some point that means that now I can get a highly distributed service that will allow me to share a picture of my sandwich with you. I think is what
but
happens.
really fast and from across the world.
Yes, with fault tolerance.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I'm obviously I'm really interested in that space, especially as with respect to it being. Like I feel like where the Syntasso and the Craddox people are coming from is, if you're building a platform based on Kubernetes, the platform builders do this, right? Like their job is defining all those promises and how they get used. And it kind of creates this interesting layer between like the infrastructure and the developers. I don't really even know. It's a little like esoteric.
And the promises are building blocks that can be composed into these more complex things.
Exactly.
And then I think it is really important that when you're building a platform, you have all of your logic behind APIs. So then you can interact with them. Like maybe the first time you interact through a web UI, where you can have service discovery and education and stuff built in. But then if you're making that ephemeral development environment every day, then you don't want to have to click through all the same buttons on a UI every single day. You want to have a CLI so you can automate it.
Yeah. You don't. I re-encountered the word ClickOps multiple times last week.
Yeah,
I'm not really sure where that came from, but
yeah.
Anyways, yeah. Okay. So getting out of the exciting footnote of promise theory and all of that, like, so what's your take on what platform engineering means in this community here, like, or at least in the conversation that happened last week? Like, what are they? I know there's a couple of great PDFs from the working group about what platform engineering is, but when you were hearing it and encountering it, like, what does it seem like in people's heads?
I think the part where they're making resources accessible to internal people on their team, like platform engineers make resources available internally at their company, is pretty standard. But then the process of how to do it and the best practices, there seem to be a lot of people having light bulbs go off in terms of like, oh, that makes a lot of sense that I wouldn't just make a backstage plugin for it and have that be the end all be all.
Right. Okay. So there's more of like, that's a good way of putting it, is like, you could have, I'm rephrasing what you said, but you could have, it could mean I just add this new service.
Yeah.
And then I'm done. Right? Or it could mean something more. Like, and I guess this is where the whole like platform as a product and, product management of platforms comes in, is like, I guess, at least for me, like, that's what makes something platform engineering is you're talking with developers and constantly and frequently, like, finding out what they need, so to speak, and working on that. Delivering a product instead of just a service, basically. I think
the platform engineering maturity model is in progress right now.
Yeah.
But they do list some criteria that, like, your organization should have at least these things before you consider trying to implement platform engineering. And one of the things is, like, you should have good communication between business units at your company. Yeah. And if you don't have that, you're never going to be successful with the platform.
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic document. I remember, like, I was lucky to get asked to review it, and it was just like, man, it's a good document. I'm always surprised / dismayed that it's not just like common knowledge that it exists, right? Because I think a lot of discussions, I'm guessing, in like big organizations about what are we going to do about this platform engineering? Like, it could be like, well, here's 15 pages. Now we're done.
Yeah, right? There it is. It's spelled out for you. It's nice.
Yeah.
And it's really cool that the community comes together like that to make such a thing, because it feels like a new day and age. Like, in the past, it's been so competitive and secretive and everything else.
Yeah.
Each their own.
Yeah, no, you bring up a good point that I was going to say it's unfair, but I think it's fair to historically compare like the CNCF to like the OpenStack community and other things like that. And like, I don't think the OpenStack community, they probably did now that I'm saying this, but I don't remember them doing things like those two papers, right? And it is like, I think it's nice for a community to do not just the technology, but how you use the technology sort of work, because that often is left up to those of us with commercial interests. And the answer is always us.
I was thinking my first KubeCon was 3 years ago in LA, and I like, VMware paid for me to go, and I didn't know how to meet people. I didn't know like where to go or what to do or how to figure out where to go and what to do. And so I think if I could talk to my 3 years ago self and to help me like navigate all the different possibilities and people you can meet and little groups you could go to, I would tell myself to go to the CNCF Slack workspace and look at all of the channels there. And all the active channels are each their own little community, and they're probably all having meetups. And the working group channels start with WG. So WG/platforms is how you'd find the working group people and how you would find out about Platform Coffee. Yeah, or SIGs also. But I think that would be, if anyone's listening and going to a KubeCon, I think that's a good place to start in terms of meeting like-minded people and having these discussions. Because these discussions, like the talks are awesome. And something like only 8% of talks get accepted. So if you're going to one, it's a relevant one, probably with good speakers. But it still doesn't really have the value of a face-to-face conversation where you can actually say, here's my problem. Oh, you did something similar. How did you solve it?
Yeah.
Like, that's invaluable.
Yeah. Well, so that's a good topic. What are like 2 other tips you would give people going to, obviously specifically to the gigantic KubeCon, but also like conferences like that in general? Like, and your first one is I think it is something that someone wouldn't normally do if they're not an experienced conference goer, which is find the communities and go talk with them.
Yeah. Something else I would do is I would have clear goals going into it. Like as an advocate, sure, but like if you're working at a company and you get to go and you are on an engineering team, maybe you're on a platform engineering team, you're like, okay, I haven't evaluated GitOps yet. That's the next thing we're going to do. So I'm only going to consume GitOps content because the amount of content is so vast. If you try to just consume it all or just whatever happens to come at you at a moment, like your head's going to spin around and nothing's going to stick. But if you're like, hey, I'm going to walk through the expo hall, I'm ignoring all of the booths except for the ones that have something to do with GitOps and have a conversation with them. Like if you could narrow the scope of what you're interested in and what you hope to get out of KubeCon, then I think that you could walk away with more actionable steps.
Sure. I like that. It's sort of like have an agenda. Like what it is. Yeah, that's good because it kind of couples well, I think, with your first point because I mean, a conference like KubeCon is well funded enough that they put videos of the talks up the next week, and so like you can attend whatever talk you want to see, right? But it's those unrecorded human interactions that are going to be valuable. So that's what you want to focus on if, like you say, you're interested in GitOps stuff. Go ask people questions and things.
Yeah. And then I guess if I had to do a third one, well, my mind's on the expo floor. So the project pavilion is really cool, where all the CNCF projects get their own little booth. And then, and I don't say little in a pejorative way. I say little because it's physically smaller.
Yeah.
And the maintainers hang out there, and it's not a company trying to sell you something. It's like genuinely learning how things work. And the CNCF kind of keeps upping they keep doing better and better. So now there are tours. So if you just see all of these names of projects and have no idea what anything is, that's okay. You go to one of these tours and they'll walk you around and kind of give you a lay of the land.
They have like a docent.
Exactly. Named George.
Docent George. That sounds delightful. Huh. All right. Well, were there any other? So, platform engineering, big theme. Were there any other themes that popped out to you?
Definitely like how to run and manage Gen AI size workloads on Kubernetes. So there's a project called KUEUE that came out, and it's about running Gen AI workloads across clusters and across geographies.
Okay.
And kind of like, you put your cluster in your queue, and then your batch job, really, it's in the queue, and then it runs in its turn, and you have whatever. It went on. But I thought that was interesting. And as far as like, in Paris, like the keynotes, like every single keynote mentioned AI. And this one, like when they talked about the Q project, they didn't say this is for AI. It was more implied, but it was a little nicer to get into like how things work instead of
right. Yeah, that was one thing I wanted to ask you about in our I think our last episode, our conversation with Rachel. At some point, you were like, "Ugh." You didn't. You were much wordier than this, but this is the way I remember it. You were like, "Ugh, AI." But I think you kind of put into words a thought that I have every now and then is like, what happened? Like, it used to be containers is what we talked about, and now we talk about AI, and I don't like that.
Part of it is like, I was just wrapping my head around the other thing finally, and now you're just going to move the finish line on me? What the heck?
Exactly. Yeah. But I like the way you framed it. I mean, well, one, I like the way you framed it, and I hope it's also the way the people saying it believe it to be so. That's an oddly phrased thing, is that it is good to focus on, okay, so as the container management orchestration, as the infrastructure people, what is our role in doing AI stuff, right? Never mind how awesome and the potential it is, but now that we need to do the actual work, what is it going to be? And I think that that's helpful. Yeah.
And that I think there's something about just, it was pure hype last time around, and there's nothing for my really logical brain to grasp into. Like, every time I hear anyone talk about AI back then, it was like, oh, you can make a chatbot. Like, are we just like having intelligent chatbots for every company? And then is that what we're all like screaming about right now? I don't understand. Like, what's the point? Like, what is this actually going to like really do? Yeah. But now it's starting to take shape in a more interesting way on that side. And we have more concrete problems that need to be solved. And that's more satisfying, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like we're still in the chatbot era. There's some slight new things, like I read, that the Bojangles fried chicken chain, they're using AI to take orders, which is kind of like an advanced version of a chatbot, but still kind of only a chatbot.
When you figure out a use for AI that's not somehow chatbot related, please let me know. I would like to hear about it.
Exactly. I think that would be great. Well, okay. So, first of all, are there any other themes? So we had platform engineering, AI discussion is becoming practical and just sort of like infrastructure stuff. Any other things that came up that you thought were interesting?
A little bit about greener workloads, ironically, because Gen AI is not great for the environment. So there's a project called Kepler, Kubernetes efficient power level exporter. I don't know if I got that right. Something.
You got to make a card for that, and then you'll remember.
There's an R at the end. Whatever, it's close enough. But it's you can run it. When you're using cloud resources, you don't have any visibility into what kind of machines you're running on necessarily, so Kepler has a little bit of AI in there and can figure out like what machine you're running on, and then use some certain models to figure out, okay, with a workload of this size, you're probably using about this much resources, and it can give you metrics about the efficiency, the power efficiency of whatever workload you're running. And that's pretty cool. So there's some talk about we can do better for the children. Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember when this is several years ago now, but like when all the sustainability and green stuff in IT came about, I remember a lot of, myself included, a lot of the Americans were like, what are we talking about here? And then you would talk with Europeans and they would be like, yes. Like, and not only out of a sense of like, the children, but also because there's actual like laws and regulations that they have over here that they are interested in complying with, which is like, I guess, win one for regulations. It makes things happen.
Yeah. So I think, and in terms, please don't think this is comprehensive in any way, but in terms of what touched me during my time at KubeCon, flitting around like a butterfly without the aid of a personal assistant, these are the things that came up for me.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you had one session, right? You and Victor?
Oh, I had 2 sessions if you count the day zero stuff.
What was the day zero stuff then?
I moderated a panel about eBPF and security.
Oh, was that fun?
Yeah, it was a blast. Actually, it was really fun. I didn't expect to like it so much.
So I only barely know what eBPF is, but the fact of you saying and security, it makes me think, Is it? Do you think it's one of those like networking things that ends up just being security, or like is there more? Does it have more to it than just like being a really good way to secure things?
It also can do observability. So
right,
kind of like service mesh at a different level.
Yeah,
networking, security, observability.
Yeah. Did you get to the bottom why it has such a strange name instead of a cutesy name like Kepler or other things like that?
BPF is part of the Linux kernel without the E. Like it's part of the Linux kernel called Berkeley Packet Filter. I don't really know. And then E is extended Berkeley Packet Filter. But it's used instead of BPF now, or not in addition to. And so it stands for Extended Berkeley Packet Filter. But if you look at the eBPF docs and it's like, what does eBPF stand for? What it tells you is it doesn't stand for anything. Like it doesn't make sense anymore in that context. So just think of it as a nonsensical acronym.
Oh, that's good.
But yeah. So what eBPF allows you to do is to watch all of your, you can observe and or manipulate all of your network traffic at the kernel level, but in a safe, sandboxed way.
Yeah. Which is good, because I presume once you can observe what's happening on the network, unless it's encrypted traffic, end-to-end encrypted stuff, you're kind of
even
screwed.
If it is encrypted.
Oh, don't tell the people.
It sees full end-to-end stuff. So that was part of the conversation, was how to use it safely.
Oh, that's no good. Or maybe it is good. Who knows? I don't really understand encryption. It gets to that level of like I was having someone, who was it? Oh, I'm always trying to get someone to explain how, back to the AI stuff, how like generative AI stuff works. And at some level, it's just like math. And then I'm out.
Hash, I'm gone.
Yeah.
Algorithm, peace.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. and encryption is the same way. I'm just like, you got keys and whatever. I gotta go. I don't know.
Have you heard quantum computing? The problem that's going to arise once they figure that out.
Well, all I know is that then it can crack all encryption or something, right?
Yes, all encryption can be broken by quantum computing.
Yeah,
so,
it'll be like that
awesome.
movie Sneakers. Remember that, where they had the computers and then it could break. It had Ben Kingsley in it, and so it's like, oh, Gandhi has a mainframe. It was very odd, and it had Dan Aykroyd, I think maybe River Phoenix, and then the salad dressing guy, Paul Newman. Great.
I wonder how he feels about being known as the salad dressing guy now.
Yeah.
I guess
question.
At least you get to be known, right? It's more than most of us.
At least he can be famous. At least Paul Newman can finally be famous for something.
Whatever it takes.
Exactly. So you had that panel you moderated. Now I watched most of your choose your thing with Victor, which was entertaining as always. And
not that entertaining if you only watched most of it.
Well, I stuff came up. My Kim, my wife, is out of town, so I also have to. I got to work and manage the kids. And
I'm kidding. I don't mind.
I'll get back to it.
No, you won't. It's okay.
I think there was. I've seen enough of your and Victor's talks that there was some. Now I don't know if you're this way, but when I'm very familiar with people's public speaking, it becomes a thoroughly enjoyable sport to like find the little, not the cracks, but to be able to see behind like what's going on and like, get some looking and stuff. And then in that context, the highlight for me was, I assume this is true, but you had some comment where like, we don't actually know what each other is going to say. Yeah. And that was fantastic. That
we never do.
Yeah. That like, as someone who I don't present a lot with other people, but someone who presents a lot, like after a while, you've got to, as a speaker, be kind of like, I got to make this not boring as fuck, and like just like do something. And so like that's a good way to do that.
So I just want to give context to anyone listening who doesn't know me or Victor or what we're talking about. Victor and I do choose your own adventure style KubeCon talks, where I'll go over. Like this time it was around observability. Last time it was around security. Before that it was around basics of a production environment. But I will go over all of the tools each system design in that space and all of the tools that can do that system design choice. And then the audience votes. And then Victor does a live demo based on what they choose.
Yeah.
So he can build his demo and have everything ready to go no matter what combination happens on his side. And then on my side, I put together a lot of elaborate slides and storytelling and like illustration and goofiness. And then, yeah, we don't know what the other one's going to do.
Yeah, no, it's a great format because like you're saying, you have the you do the conceptual overview so that people can appreciate and be educated by the demoing that happens, right? And so I think it's and also you bring a story into it, which makes learning better. And then I like so. Correct me where I get this wrong, but the topic was observability, and Victor was going to go over Prometheus, or was it Pixie?
Yeah,
I forget the other one, and they picked Pixie, right?
They did, yeah.
Yeah, and so he was kind of going over how you do observability with each, and this is actually, now that I'm going over this, why I need to get to the conclusion is because every now and then Victor would be like, "You made the wrong choice."
You chose Pixie. I'm going to demo it, but you're going to regret this later.
yeah, which was great. So, like what, like so, observability is another interesting topic to go over a little bit. I mean, what is the? So I think the concept of observability, of course, I don't know if it was only like charity majors and the honeycomb people who brought it up, but it kind of started, maybe 10 years ago. I don't actually know, but like it's what does it come to mean at this point? Like what, in whatever context you want, but especially in the kind of like cloud native Kubernetes world, like what is it?
So at first it was like, hey, we have logs and metrics. And then later they figured out traces. And everyone's like, we better collect all the data we can. But then they didn't really know what to do with it. Maybe put each thing separately behind dashboards. But it didn't necessarily help you figure out what was wrong without having to jump between dashboards and projects and figuring out whatever. And it used to also be really hard because different signals had different formats, different vendors had different formats, different signals. When I say signal, I mean a log, metric, or trace needs to be stored in its own way to be efficient when we're dealing with such high levels of data. But what you were dancing around as open telemetry is kind of trying to aim to fix all of these problems.
Standardize it, I guess.
Standardizing is like not even, it's too small of a word. Like, yes, that, but it's like what they're trying to standard. Like, okay, when I got into open telemetry, I was very confused because I couldn't understand what it was. I understood it was a standardization, but it's standardizing like the protocol, but it's standardizing like different data. Like there's so much, the metadata, the different storage types, like everything, like ubiquitous, like diligent standardization around every possible thing.
Okay. So if I have the phrases right, it wants to say, here's all the signals and all of the attributes of the signals and how to measure and manage. It basically,
how, if you want to make software that generates the signals, here's how that's like standardizations for that software. Right. So OpenTelemetry is standardization that has become popular, so it's a standard. Mm-hmm. But then it's also software that is built on the standardization. And it's not just one piece of software because that would be too easy. It's 3 different types of software. So there's the language-specific APIs where you could admit the signals. Mm-hmm. And then there's SDKs where you could receive the signals and do stuff with it. And then you can do lots of cool things, but the important thing with the SDKs is you can correlate all the signals with each other, with other things that are happening in the system, or whether they're a part of a larger transaction. And so with the SDKs now and the standardization, you're able to get a holistic picture of everything that's happening in your system and how it relates to everything else.
Okay, that makes sense. That's interesting.
And then there's a third piece of software called a collector, but it's not that important.
Oh, I assume it collects things?
It's like an observability data pipeline.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
That's transforms.
And then okay. So in the let's see, broadly, very abstract observability. Sort of specific way of kind of specific way of doing it. Open telemetry is sort of like the way you would do that. And then, are there multiple implementations of it, or does the open telemetry community seek to have like, this is the code? There is no other code like that does it.
In theory, you could have your own implementation of an open telemetry collector, but I don't know how much that's used. And that's not saying that it's not used. I'm literally saying I deeply don't know.
Yeah. Huh.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. That was the last programming job I had was basically monitoring and management and logs and all that kind of stuff. So,
okay, yeah,
I'm always mildly interested in that kind of stuff, but then also not.
What's interesting about it too is Prometheus is still kind of its own separate thing. So you still have your Prometheus metrics that are only recently, I think, compatible with those OpenTelemetry SDKs so that they can be. But OpenTelemetry also does its own form of metrics. And then there's a whole debate about whether pushing or pulling your metrics is the better way to get your telemetry data.
Yeah,
I have no opinion. I have no skin in that fight. Yes.
Well. I was joking that one day we should have a podcast called "Kids These Days." So, as a preview for that podcast, here's a little segment. Back when I was working on this, we had that same conversation where except we would call it agent or agentless. And,
okay.
You would either install this big chunk of software on the machine or the thing you wanted to monitor that would collect the metrics and send it to you, or you would have a centralized thing that would call out to the machine, or it would push it just over and over. Same conversations. Who knows? The push and pull of push and pull. That's good stuff.
And then it's annoying because you could, like, metrics can be collected by daemon set or logs, or it can be collected by your service mesh, or like you might need a special exporter if it's not covered, or you instrument your applications. I don't know. There's so many points of concern when you're trying to get all of the data and what types of data, just like everything.
So we've only got a little bit longer. So I'm trying to start. I think when we were talking with Rachel, we brought this up a little bit, and I think it's a topic we talk about on Software Defined Talk a lot. And let's pull out the file of the business of open source. And do you have any reports to file in that file from KubeCon? Like what are the vendors up to versus the open source stuff versus not? Like how's it all panning out?
I can't say I paid too much attention to that. I meant to, but let's talk about community.
So for Whitney, it was a non-issue. It didn't. We'll mark that attendance as PTO for the bureau.
Did I mention I paid my own way this time?
Oh, yeah. Wow. I guess you didn't have to pay for registration, so only airfare and travel. Do you pick different hotels and travel if you're paying for yourself than if you're expensing it?
I stayed at an Airbnb this time, which
that's
the
nice.
Corporations don't generally let you do that.
Yeah,
but for real, I want to talk about community. Can I do that?
Go ahead.
Here's something. I saw that there's a lot more certifications. So you can, like, almost all of the graduated projects, you could get certified in Argo. You can get certified in Falco or whatever. Yeah. And then they're also working on a platform engineering certification. So they're starting to do discipline-wide ones.
That's interesting.
And then, have you heard about this CubeStronaut program? I think they unrolled it in Paris. So if you pass all of the Kubernetes exams, there are like 5, like CKA, CKAD, CKAS, KCNA, KCSA.
Hopefully there's one.
Listen to me.
Yeah, hopefully there's also one called Another Goddamn K. certification.
Yes. And if you pass all 5 of those, then you get this distinction of being a Cubestronaut.
Oh, that's fun.
And you get they send you a jacket. It's like a badge of honor. It's a big status thing. And then I'm a CNCF ambassador, and we have a CNCF ambassador breakfast every time. And this time, Cubestronauts were also invited to the breakfast, so that was nice.
Yeah? What were they like? Fun bunch of people?
They were exactly how you think they'd be.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's nice.
They were nice. Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's a good thing to wrap it up on, because I think I've only been to a few KubeCons, and yeah, they have really good community. People there are nice. There's not any weirdness going on.
Yeah, I think at least in my circles, we actually have this idea of a Pac-Man conversation. You should always leave space for one person to join. And when someone does join the table or something, we're always very welcoming and happy to get to know them. And there's Cloud Native Rejects. Have you ever been to a Cloud Native Rejects?
I haven't. I signed up for it once, and then I forget why I didn't go. But I haven't been to it. Yeah. The new people to KubeCon, go to Cloud Native Rejects. It's a free conference that happens before KubeCon, and it is if your talk gets rejected from KubeCon, you can apply it to Cloud Native Rejects. Yeah, and it's just a joy. There are so many good community members there, and we're not all exhausted yet. And that's right.
I also saw the keynote. The talk they picked for the keynote was really, really funny and good.
For the reject one, you mean?
For rejects, yeah. It was about malicious compliance.
Yes.
And security. It was Duffy Cooley and Kyle Quest. Yeah. And so it was you have 4,000 vulnerabilities, but you need to get this deployed by tomorrow, ship your software by tomorrow. What do you do? And so there was, of course, you could use this Slim AI or whatever and minimize your base image. That's legit, and then that'll get rid of any vulnerabilities from unnecessary stuff. And that's legitimately good advice. But then they're and then you could use this other tool that obfuscates the metadata, and then bam, 0. And you're just oh no, that should not have been so easy. What are we doing?
Malicious compliance indeed. What's that other phrase that means you protest by complying? That's another good concept. I forget what that is.
You do it so well that it's a nuisance.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you follow the spirit and the letter of the you follow the letter of the law, not the spirit. I'll have to look that up. Well, that was a good overview. I think next time there's a conference, we know that you are a excellent probe for figuring out what was going on there.
I'm glad you think so. I wasn't 100% sure how this conversation would go.
Yeah. Well, swimmingly as always. Well, next episode, we'll be back to our usual interviewing people. If you're listening to this, you're not going to know this, but Whitney and I have many things lined up next week. I think the next 6 weeks of shows we'll be recording next week to go behind the curtains, which will be fun.
Yeah. Because I'm going to South America on a hiking trip.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right. So in the future, as a listener, if you're catching up on the back catalogs, in 4 to 5 hours, you'll hear how that went. All right. Well, as always, this has been Software Defined Interviews. If you go to softwaredefinedinterviews.com, you can figure out how to subscribe, look at show notes, find all those other episodes, and we'll see everyone next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.